Welcome to Runnez Radio, where we bring you the stories and the teachings of the world's leading high performers, as well as some bloody amazing human beings as well. If you find some value in the show, we would greatly appreciate you taking a few seconds to leave us a 5-star review. It really does enable us to help a lot more people. The show is brought to you by Runnez.com, that's RUNNEZ.com. Runnez is your online running coach, no matter your level or aspirations. Just put Runnez in your ears and off you go. Without further ado, let's get on to the show. A true legend of Australian sport. So if you are an overseas listener, just buckle in and have a listen to this.
Anytime a leader speaks, everyone is listening. Everyone is watching. What are you rewarding? What are you challenging? Family, friends, and it probably hit me then how important the moment was to literally hundreds of thousands of people.
So those next few years, Roosie, the Swans, they never really seemed to bottom out, which I think, again, is a credit to the system we spoke about earlier, the process that we just used to refuse to be talent-based and refuse to just rest on your laurels. It always came back to the process, which you've obviously followed through really well in business and other stuff, mate. Coming to the end of the time there, the boys were getting older. How did it all come about where you said, okay, I just want to take a step back from life at the very head role? And then, I guess, take us through that period where you're a dad and you're a husband and you could spend a bit more time, and then you said, okay, enough's enough, I need to have a few years out of the game or out of head coaching.
Yeah, I always had this philosophy. It was funny as a player that a coach probably had a 6 or 7 year shelf life. And that was probably predicated on not necessarily winning a premiership. So it wasn't black and white, but I sort of felt leading into, I think my last year was 2010, leading into that season, John Longmire was starting to get, inquiries about becoming a senior coach, and I sat down. I thought, well, another year will sort of take it to 8.5 that I've been coaching. I think it's time for the club to have a change. Not that I appointed John, but I wanted the club, if they felt John was the right person, I didn't want to retire at the end of the next year and then John had got a job somewhere else, and I was leaving anyway. So I sat down with Tammy and Andrew Ireland and Richard Collis, and then we all decided, that it was going to be my last year, and then they appointed John as a successor. So it worked out really well for myself, the footy club, and obviously John also. So I think it was more of a case of just understanding that self-awareness that, you've got to have enormous energy to be able to do it. It's a broad skill set, and it takes a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of passion. So yeah, getting out, and the Sydney Swans Academy was starting at the time, so I was really fortunate that Andrew Ireland asked me to be involved in that. Chris Smith, who's a really good mate of mine, and I ran the academy for 3 years. So my boys were both in the academy, so it allowed me some time to sort of step back from coaching, do some media work for the academy, which I loved, shaping the next sort of generation of players and men. A lot of them obviously didn't go on and play for the Swans, but we had a significant impact on their lives. I loved working with Smithy, and had a really good 3 years before getting back into it.
Yeah, so the media stuff is what people see on the surface, which was a fair chunk of your life as well, on the couch and shows like that in prime time. But yeah, that kind of, people wouldn't know that about the Sydney Academy and those kind of things. And I think you were coaching one of the boys. Did you coach the junior footy as well in that period, or was that when you were actually coaching Sydney? Yeah,
I sort of coached Tyler, because in Sydney, with all due respect, a lot of the dads were rugby league dads or soccer dads or whatever. So I was always sort of coaching Tyler's team more so. Dylan's team had a guy, Mick Keogh's a really good fella, came from, I think, Albury area, so he had a bit of an AFL background. So I got involved in that team as well, but mainly sort of coached Tyler's team and then coached the academy. So both the boys through the academy, which was, it was great to be. And even when I was coaching Sydney, I was, able to coach the boys on the Sundays if we weren't playing Sunday, or if I'd fly back from interstate Saturday night. So it was a really important part of my life, has always been my family.
Really talks to that life balance that we haven't really touched on too much yet, but you detest the word work-life balance, which you love. You do a lot now in the corporations you work with, and we'll flick to that later. But amazing balance and self-awareness. To be able to say what's really important to me, what's really important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the reason I don't talk about work-life balance is because it sounds like, you're completely separating the two. And I just don't think you can do that. Like, I remember, on a Thursday, I'd take the boys to brekkie every Thursday morning. Now, that fitted around my work, but it wasn't a case of Thursday was a work day. I remember, the players would come in the rooms after the game. And, it depends on your job and what you do as how interactive they can both become. But if you have this balance, this overall balance, you can sort of say, well, today, I can work from home and drop the kids off at school. Tomorrow I've got to be in a meeting at the other way. You look at it, well, no, Thursday's a work day, so I can't see my family. So that's probably the way I look at things. Is just getting the balance of your life right, and it doesn't always work out as simple as that. But I think if you've got self-awareness, so the ability to always involve my family where I could. I remember the boys always wanted to come in the box and help me coach, but I said, boys, we probably have to draw the line on that. So that wasn't going to happen.
No, that's the thing. It's just, I guess, with the businesses you work with today, Performance by Design and everyone that you work with today, it's just been putting it on their radar, at least. Just putting it on their radar, because there's a fair chance that for 20 years, some of these CEOs and other leaders wouldn't even be on their radar. It's just, and unfortunately, you get pulled back in, and it's happening post-COVID already. People are getting pulled back into those 70-hour weeks, nose to the grindstone. You forget what actually is important. So really important there. Moving on to Melbourne, which outside of looking in back then, I was the best possible appointment by some margin. But how did it come about behind the scenes? Because this was a massive appointment for the club, who'd been down and out for so long, and just had a real, again outside of looking in, real. From a culture point of view, weren't there anywhere near it. How did it all come about behind the scenes? What started the wheels in motion for you eventually to say, I'll take the role?
Yeah, well, probably about towards the middle of, what year was it, 2012 or must have been 2012. I was working with the academy, and I had a discussion with Andrew Ireland, and Andrew sort of said, look, we're going to have to give you a fairly big, heavy pay cut, and, we can't keep doing this anymore. And I was sort of like, look, and the club were amazing. The Swans were incredible to me. So I sort of then started to think about, okay, well, that's great. I've really enjoyed my time. What's next? Up until that stage, I really hadn't thought about coaching again, because I knew I had to put all my energy into it. Probably coincided with Peter Jackson ringing me a number of times after Neildy got exited from the Melbourne Footy Club. And then I started to think more about it, and then I met with the leadership group, and that was probably the turning point. I met with the leadership group towards the end of the season, and spoke to them and had a really good conversation with them, and then it just came about that it's time to get back in, move back to Melbourne, where I'm originally from, reconnect with family and friends and all that. So there's many reasons, but probably the main one was the timing and the energy was sort of back, and I believed I could help the footy club. That was the main thing. I believed the leaders were a good group of leaders, good people, and I just wanted to get in and sort of help them become a more successful footy club.
Not too different to a business that you'd have now, really. If you're looking at the synergy between the Demons of 2013 and businesses all around the world that you're helping. Take us through the first few games, because you got a lot to change, and it's no fault of the players, just the way it was. So you got a lot of talent out there on the field. You got the Nathan Joneses and these kind of boys, but take us through, I guess, the whole transition between where you knew you'd come from, Sydney Swans, what you guys had built, which was like elite, phenomenal, to what you found when you got to Melbourne.
Yeah, look, probably the main thing is that the good people there. So that was a really good start. Glenn Bartlett, really good chairman. Peter Jackson, really good CEO. Josh Marnie, young football manager, but a really good person. Todd Viney, a lot of time for. So what I liked about it, probably one of the reasons I took the job, because I knew some of the people. David Misson was my fitness coach at Sydney, and he was also the fitness coach at Melbourne. And I was able to bring in my own staff, Georgie Stone, Danny McPherson, Ben Matthews, Brett Allison. So that was and I knew Jade Rawlings pretty well. So I was really confident in the staff. The players were good guys. But what you got to remember in a footy club is that 18 to 22-year-old period is really important. If you're coming to a footy club and you're trying to create really good habits and standards, that's the time. It's 4 years where you've got a chance to get them and mould them and shape them. So we had to reprogram pretty much every single player, other than the ones that we brought in ourselves, at an under 18 level, and we could train them from day one. So there was a lot of work to be done, but there was an appetite for hard work. The players didn't shirk it. They just needed to be reprogrammed, and we had to narrow the focus a lot in that first year. Talk about winning your own ball, contested ball was a huge focus. Tackling was a huge focus. And then defence, setting our defence and getting that. I think the average scores against were like 122 points or something like that. So we needed to get that down. So I was really clear on what I needed to do, and knew it was going to take some time, but had really good people around me to help.
It's a good start when you got those 10 names that you mentioned, and obviously the playing list as well. No one goes out there. Well, you spoke off. No one goes out there to lose. No one goes out there to perform badly at any level, let alone the highest level. The process. It's hard when you're coming from a long way back, and those boys weren't used to singing the song too often. How did we get them to believe in system, process, as opposed to looking further ahead to the outcome? Like, how does that happen at a side like that? Because it is a little bit easier when you're finishing in the 8 every year at Sydney.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference when I took over at Sydney from Rodney Eade, we played in the grand final in '96. I think we played 4 or 5 different final series. So when I took over at Sydney, they already had a history of winning games of football and knew what it looked like. At Melbourne, there was about 6 years of not winning many games. The year before I took over, they won 2 and lost 20. So you're right. There's a lack of awareness about what makes a winning team. And they were very outcome focused. They were very worried when the scoreboard started ticking over. You could tell the body language, they get really frustrated with each other. So it took a while just to get them to focus on the process. What can you control in that moment? The opposition's kicked a goal. Where do you have to stand at the next stoppage? We've kicked the goal. Where do you have to stand at the next stoppage? So it took us a while to sort of, really reprogram them. And also who had the appetite to do it. Some players don't have the appetite to be successful. And when I say that, like you said, they try, but I talk about effort and maximum effort. There's a big difference between effort. Everyone in the AFL system gives effort. Richmond gives maximum effort. And the top teams give maximum effort. So you had to decipher as well who had the appetite for it, give them 12 months, make some changes. So it's not an easy process, but when you get good people and you find out who wants to work and who doesn't want to work, you can sort of work your way through it.
I think it's trainable as well. Like, obviously, when you're neuroplasticity, we know about how the brain can be remolded, and it is for a 24-year-old athlete for the first time in his life to be or her life to be getting told about just bringing it right back. Because often people get carried away with premierships, BNFs, running PBs, winning medals, whatever. But we just bring it right back. It actually, over the process, 500, 600, 800 days does take care of itself, but not easy. Especially 44 different individuals. You've spoken really well about empathy fatigue and that, which I think gets sugarcoated a lot with leaders and coaching. And you've also spoken about this, I think, mate. You can speak to this, but how people can sometimes just put it on the surface about how easy it can be to lead. It's not an easy job, and when you're going into a role like that, I can imagine the genuine fatigue coming into a role like that day to day.
Yeah, I think so. It's a really difficult job, and I think having an understanding of where coaches are coming from. Most coaches come from being assistant coaches. They've had probably 8 direct players, one part of the ground where that's midfield, and then all of a sudden you become a senior coach and you're asked to manage 44 players, medical staff, fitness staff, leadership groups, all those sorts of things. So it's a big jump up. So I think having done it at Sydney, and probably when I arrived, I understood then why Peter was desperate to get someone who'd done the job before, because it was an impossible job, with all due respect, for a novice assistant coach to become a senior coach at the Melbourne Footy Club. It was the skill set would have been too difficult to do it. Would have been able to learn on the job. It would have taken a while. So I think, being able to bring, the people I brought in, having Dave Misson there, so the infrastructure was really good. But the ability to navigate between high standards and good relationships and know when to be able to, be a bit harder on the players, be a bit softer on the players, more direct, less direct, but also know exactly what we wanted to achieve within the first 12 months. I think that was a really big part of it as well. Not get too focused on all parts of the game. I think one of the biggest mistake young coaches can make is try to fix everything. You just can't fix everything. You've got to be really clear, and we were really, really clear in the first 12 months what we wanted to achieve.
That's brilliant advice in business, in sport, in life in general. And another one I love, I know it's part of your 25 pillars that people can find definitely online or on his book. But Roosie speaks of, and this must have been a massive part of being an experienced coach, that I don't know if the experiences would have been able to do this, but not if you've got nothing positive to say, just wait till Monday, or don't fly off the handle in the heat of the moment, because it's nothing good can come from that. So you must have had to use that a few times, no doubt, in that kind of era.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's an awareness of where the players are at. Like you can imagine how emotional a game is. When you've lost a game, you got the MCG, you might have 3 or 4 minutes to get from the coach's box to the change room, sort of thing. So, you don't have time to gather the information. I've seen relationships destroyed from coaches to players after that time. So those 25 points were really valuable. I talk about it as holding myself accountable to the leader that I wanted to be. And that was really important to have those notes in my desk for 3 years. And I think the other thing too, at Melbourne, I was pretty positive, and the first sort of 12 months we're trying to find positives, because the players it was really difficult time, 6 years of losing. They didn't go out not to win. So we sort of had to be pretty positive through that period. I think as leaders, we often just pick out the negative stuff, and that's another big message I give to the corporates. Well done, well done, well done. And then all of a sudden, if you are going to give, you need to do this better, it doesn't come on the back of no positive feedback, and then people go, the only time Roosie's talking to me is when he's telling me what not to do. So I think as leaders, we've got to get better at, in real time, saying, mate, thanks very much for helping me yesterday. That was really good what you did in that meeting. I was sort of floundering a bit. Or, mate, thanks for calling that client the other day. Really appreciated that. And in footy terms, we had to, even though we weren't winning many games, we had to highlight the positives and be really clear. So our reviews were really clear. This is what we do well, this is what we not do. Does everyone understand that? Really clear. So players would never walk out of a review at Melbourne and Sydney not really understanding exactly what was expected of them, both from a positive and negative point of view.
That's brilliant. I think 4-1 is the feedback ratio, is that right? And that's perfect. And also playing to their strengths, like the AFL list or employee, you've got lots of strengths. So let's not. It's hard in bad times to remember the strengths sometimes, like whether it's football or business or whatever it may be. So continue to raise their strengths up and make them aware of what they've done well, which is bloody important. That's monstrous. Last one on footy, we'll move on. But I think in the current climate, in any climate really, since the last 30, 40 years of footy media, from a coach's perspective, I think it gets lost in translation what they actually are trying to do. I'd love to see someone who's in the media at the moment, maybe a Buckley, or he always seems to be in the media, or maybe Clarko to a lesser extent, but I'd love to them to be able to articulate better what you just articulated to me, but it doesn't get spoken about ever, and it's just this open slather really for it.
I think part of the problem too is you just don't have any ex-coaches in the media. I think Ross Lyon's the only ex-coach in the media. So, and I was a player myself, but the players only see the game through their own lens. So when you're listening to majority of past players talk about the game, as I said, I was one as well, but it probably wasn't until I coached I fully understood the implication of what Jaden Short and Caden McIntosh have on Dustin Martin. But if you're a player, it just becomes about Dustin Martin. You don't understand what Nathan Buckley's trying to do in relation to 42 players, because, as I said before, even the most selfless player, Brett Kirk was probably the most selfless player that I coached, but it still fundamentally had to prepare himself every week, even in their most selfless player. Whereas a coach understands exactly, and if you look at the way coaches talk about the game, if you do listen to a Ross Lyon, their perspective on the game is so dramatically different. So if you're giving them more of a voice, then people start to understand, okay, that's what Nathan Buckley has to do with this particular group. But the media has become more about, headlines than it is about facts, so that becomes really frustrating, for footy clubs, particularly when they're rebuilding. And I must admit, my first 2 years at Melbourne, I was on 360, and it was the most productive part of the week because I could articulate to the Melbourne supporters, and I didn't have to leave it up to the media to tell them, because the media, the media just don't understand fully what goes on inside a footy club. So the information gets very, very distorted.
Every Monday or Tuesday night, whatever it was, you could articulate.
Yeah, you could articulate to the Melbourne supporters, look, we lost by 60 points, but, we tried Nathan Jones on such and such, and it seemed to work really well. So you were talking directly to, Bucks, if we're using him as an example, probably only gets, twice a week, maybe a 5-minute clip here or there, or a 30-second clip on the news that he can talk to the members. So it's really difficult for him when he's under pressure. And we've seen coaches, when they're under pressure, just get piled on by the media, and then the fans start to agree with the media and don't really understand what's going on inside the footy club.
I guess just thinking left field. Then there's probably ways that you can email members videos and that kind of stuff, but it is hard in the mainstream media. It's very superficial, and it's very surface stuff, which doesn't really play to anyone's hands. Really.
No,
it's just to get some clickbait. That's powerful, I think, because moving forward into you finished up at Melbourne. You said now you were clearly going to do something in performance. You're a competitive beast. You're a leader of men and humans in general. The business performance by design. I love the nurture group stuff as well, by the way, because I reckon that's really important. So take us through the next couple of years, family, the boys, Tammy, the lot.
Yeah, so finishing up at Melbourne 2016, I think it was, and then I'd been contacted by a guy in Toronto, actually an Australian guy, Emil, and Emil wanted to know whether I wanted to build a business in North America. Long story short, he ended up coming back here. He was being mentored by a guy called Jared Murphy, who I'd known Murph for many, many years, and then another fella called Warren Everett, who was running a big marketing company, who Emil had run a program for and transformed their business. So we all decided to get together and put a business together called Performance by Design. So yeah, look, it's great, mainly corporate clients, but on the back of a lot of sporting knowledge. And I mean, the biggest thing about sport is it's so accountable and it's so immediate, and the ability to review and preview and just keep getting better is just an incredible environment to be in for 40 years. Translating that to business, where it's the same principles now. Leaders are very different. You talk about building relationships, you're talking about self-awareness, you're talking about having great empathy and understanding for your staff. So that's really, really important. So I'm really enjoying that connection. And the Nurture Group events, which we haven't been able to hold because of COVID, but really it's about business and wellness. And I know it's something you're passionate about as well. This notion of, well, I'll get a leadership speaker in and I'll get Roosie in, but wellness, we'll park that a little bit. We've got to pull these things together. We've got to start to look at, so the Nurture Group retreats are all about pulling the business and the health together. The last one we had speakers, Julie Bishop, Richard de Crepney, who landed the Qantas plane, to Nam Baldwin, who's one of the great breathing coaches in Australia. Tammy doing the meditation to start the day. We'd get up, we'd meditate, maybe go for a walk on the beach, do some yoga, do some activity, go into speakers, as I said, from a business point of view. So they're amazing events, and we're hoping to re-establish them next year, which would be amazing. So yeah, look, I think sport has always been at the forefront of high performance. Mid-90s it became full-time. Things like meditation, Tammy introduced that to Sydney back in 2002, 2003. It's now become more mainstream, less in business, but more mainstream now. We were doing it in 2000, we were doing it 17, 18 years ago at the Sydney Swans. So it's great to be part of a great company, Performance by Design, and working with great corporates, but similar challenges, which is fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels, which you've obviously seen plenty of. We'll touch on that meditation and mindfulness for a minute or two, because it's well documented, the Sydney Swans, but just express to listeners how bloody important it's been in your life as well. Swans trying to implement it at Melbourne and now in big businesses.
Yeah, well, I did a meditation course over 20 years ago, and I think for me the inquisitive side of it was having been involved in sport, and I started at sort of 17 at Fitzroy. There was only a certain amount. I remember we did have 4K time trials back then, or we did our 1Kers or kick marks, handball, and I always thought to myself, yeah, we can improve, but you might get your 4K time trial down from 1350 to 1345 to 1340. So the gap was minuscule. It was certainly worth doing, but no one had worked above the shoulders. When Tammy did her PhD in meditation and learn about the academic side of it and how it has a dramatic impact on your ability to perform at all levels of your life, and we started introducing it to Sydney. So that was the area that was largely untapped, and there's so much research for those that haven't done it. Just read about it. Read about the effects of meditation and mindfulness, and you can see, you might get if you're an athlete, you will get improvement if you run harder or lift weights, but the dramatic improvement, I think, who's the guy that did the podcast, and he talks about the 100 most successful people in the world. And I think 90% of them all meditate, So we were able to introduce that at Sydney. Tammy did. Didn't make it compulsory, but it was no coincidence that some of our best players, Goodsey, Craig Bolton, Brett Kirk, were all working with Tammy. And then at Melbourne, we made it compulsory, and it had a significant impact. Tammy had this term called reset and worked with the players, and we did some visualization in the second and third year. And the players really talked about how powerful it was to come off the ground and just talk about reset, breathing, forgetting about what had happened, getting back on the field and resetting again. So, it's been something in sport that's been going on for years. And gradually the corporate world is picking up on it, which is fantastic. But it's certainly something we need to create a way better work environment than what we currently have.
Yeah, because we speak of sport and we know how important it is, but in life in general, and I think there's a misnomer in corporate world or in most spaces still that you've got to be cross-legged sitting in a room like Deepak Chopra or one of it, but it's not about that. It's certainly not about that. And I know Tammy's dedicated a life to it. I think some listeners will know my wife as well. He's very heavily involved. We've got a meditation studio. It's all about just being aware and being present and taking a minute for yourself. And if the corporate world would just take like you said, exactly what you said about the time trial, that too many checks and balances they're trying to. Whereas you've got so much upside on this other end of the spectrum with above the shoulders, mindfulness and being aware. How are you being infiltrating it into businesses? I guess if they've already employed you, you're possibly preaching to the converted. But how are you being with Performance by Design? How do you find infiltration of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we now think the time is right. So we're going to add a wellness component with Tammy in our Performance by Design Institute and Centre, which is a digital sort of platform. So we're now Tammy's got 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 5 minutes. So I think the time's right. We've had the conversation. Now it's up to so we're going to really integrate Performance by Design Wellness Centre, get those videos in, and we're really going to now promote that through our networks. Because you're right, it certainly becomes as simple as, the start of a sales meeting. Right, guys, we're going to sit here for a minute, close your eyes, let's just do a nice breathing exercise. We already talk about gratitude in our meetings as well. So we're Performance by Design, we're big on gratitude. Who would you like to thank? Someone in the room, someone outside the room. What are you grateful for? So we'll talk about that a lot, and we'll continue to integrate these wellness practices and principles within the mainstream of our business.
Yeah, that's perfect. And like you said, so much to gain from that. So if you are a leader in business, just take that on board. Speaking of leaders in business, Ruzi, you often talk about CEOs they must become like the mainstream, the leadership, and they must practice what they preach at all times. And I guess speaking to culture, go and pick the newest member of the team or the newest member of the business. Tell us about that as well. And I guess on both ends, the CEO and the rookie in the business too.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is people naturally think that if we have a business, we put a sign on the wall and we get people to come in, we've got a team. It couldn't be further from the truth. And then we'll get some purpose and values and we'll put them on the board. But you've got to bring them to life. And what we talk about is your culture is what people see, and that's why it's great to ask encourage anyone listening, ask the newest person what your culture is, because I guarantee they won't remember the HR manual. They won't remember what was in the interview. After the first week or 2 weeks, they'll actually remember the actions of the organisation. Did people say hello to me? Were people getting back to me on time? Did they reply to my emails? How did they dress? Did they turn up to meetings on time? That's your culture, all right? Now, if you can marry that up with what's on the wall and you continually reward and challenge good and bad behaviour, then you're able to shape it. We talk about one of our main mottos at Performance by Design is take the chance out of culture. How do I take the chance out of culture? I do that by putting systems and processes in place, reward and challenge, and we consistently do that, and we see that at footy clubs all the time, and then you're able to shape your culture. But the biggest thing is if the leaders aren't doing it, you're never going to have, if your leaders are saying we want everyone to turn up on time and they're turned up 10 minutes late, then eventually no one's going to turn up on time. So your leaders have to be role models, and the leaders have to walk the walk, not talk the talk. And I guess so many times, I see not only in footy clubs but in businesses, the leaders want to talk about it, but they don't want to do anything about it. And that's where our system challenges the leaders, challenges the CEO, challenges the senior exec teams. And often, when we do our first workshop and we're not invited back, I can tell you why. 99% of the time is because the leaders don't want to be held accountable to their bad behaviour, and they want to rule with an iron fist, and they don't want people to challenge them because they know their behaviour is poor, but they don't want to change their behaviour.
That's pretty powerful, and I reckon in life in general that has to be the way. It doesn't matter if you've got a little 2-man mowing business,
Yep.
or you're in charge of 5,000 employees. It just has to. It's so obvious when you're talking about it now, but then so clear that it happens everywhere. Like the opposite happens everywhere. So if you do want to be a high performer, you genuinely want to become a high performer, you mean it, then you've just got to take these principles on board. And it's not as simple as flipping a switch if it's been like inherently bad for 15, 20 years. But companies like Roosie's and other leadership companies in board, you've got to put leadership and culture at the top of your priority list, because the rest it'll be like a house of cards, just fall away. Quick fire is great, man. This might be we'll get to the a little bit lighter stuff, but big 3 high performance tips for leaders both in sport and business. 3, succinct it.
Honesty would be 1. Communication would be 2. And coupled with that is probably maintaining really clear and high standards.
You're very good at succincting stuff, Legend. Best advice for busy fathers or parents in general?
Don't wait for the big stuff. I think every moment is crucial. Don't wait because you sort of think, well, I've got to take the kids, not that you can now, but you've got to take the kids to Disneyland or Hawaii or something like that. Every interaction is valuable. Reading the book at night, spending 5 minutes in the morning, sitting down, having toast and a cup of coffee. Every single interaction is really important.
It's a good answer, and it's really important now with people. Hopefully their working relationships have changed a little bit. They can spend a little bit more time post-COVID. What are you most proud of? This could be gold day, I guess. But what are you most proud of?
I think just that integration of family. I think it was 2008 when I got nominated as Australian Father of the Year, and probably that was one of my proudest moments. To be able to be recognised in a really busy, high-profile, stressful environment of footy coaching, to be recognised and to be recognised by my kids, I think. But Dylan and Tyler, talk about how they're appreciative when I'd turn up on Sundays after coaching in Perth on a Saturday night, getting on the red eye and getting back for their games and that. So to be recognised by your kids and your wife is probably the most important achievement of my life, no question.
That's very well answered, and I love those red eye stories, like just getting on the plane and make sure you get back for the boys' games. This is a little bit more of an educational one. Books, is there anything that you would give to people in business or people that just want to be better every day? Any books, movies, podcasts, anything of the liking?
Yeah, I like Phil Jackson's stuff. So anything he was a real pioneer in that area. So anyone that hasn't read any of Phil Jackson's books, now Phil Jackson was the coach of the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan and then coached the Lakers. So he was a real pioneer in the mindfulness and meditation and challenging his players to be better people, not just better basketball players. So any of the Phil Jackson books are really interesting. On that, even if you don't follow sport, I think The Last Dance is a really, really good series, and that is, again, is on basketball. But for those of you out there who think it's sports orientated, it's very much around high performance and business and relationships and standards and navigating. Michael Jordan's the best basketball player of all time, but how did Phil get him to win a championship? It's really fascinating because a lot of stuff we talk to corporates about is that high performing salesperson. What do I do with them? And in real sense, Michael's the high performing salesperson that Phil had to mould and shape into an incredible team player. So The Last Dance is a really, really good 10-part series as well on high-performing teams.
Couldn't agree more. Too many people probably shut the door on sporting docos or sporting books like that when you can take so much out of it, even if you have no interest in the game. Last couple, mate. Average day in the life of Roosie right now.
Yeah, it's probably a bit mixed now with working with North Melbourne, working Performance by Design, hopefully starting up the Nurture Retreat soon, and obviously being a father of kids that are a bit older now, 25 and 26, nearly 27 sort of thing. So, yeah, mix and match really, which I enjoy. Some mornings are, getting into North Melbourne, doing reviews. Match day was, I try and get into match day most times as long as they're not travelling. To coffee meetings with leaders and business executives, to doing workshops, which I really enjoy with companies. So, yeah, a bit of a mixed bag. And trying to enjoy life as much as I can as
You
well
are,
and get
you
a bit of
are still
exercise.
looking very fit. I was going to say that, mate. Tell me about the exercise regime, because you are looking fantastic as we speak.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty lucky. I think I'm still able to run, and I walk with a lot of my ex-teammates who are not able to run. Laurie Serafini, Mickey Conlon. Mickey's actually able to run, so I'm pretty fortunate. But I think I've had a good relationship with exercise. I've never done it to excess. By that, I've never felt the need to run a marathon or a triathlon, because I've always had good self-awareness about my body. So if I run now, it's a 20-minute fartlek, get over the Albert Park Lake, which gives me nightmares because I used to run around it a lot when I was playing for Fitzroy. So sometimes I break into a cold sweat as I'm going around the bend and the winds hit me in the face, because I remember pre-season when we were doing 10K time trials sort of thing. But yeah, I think I've always had a good relationship, good understanding. If I go to the gym, I'll just go and do a 15, 20 minute quick body circuit weight session. So my relationship with exercise is really good, and I still think I'm a competitive athlete, so I'll play basketball against the boys and get bashed around, or go and have a kick with Tyler, or when Dylan's back in town, sort of thing. So yeah, and play golf and love my tennis, and just love being healthy and getting out and doing as much as I can.
Well, you've got a saying, and I love it. The health of your business, it all depends on the health of you, or is it something of that nature?
Yeah, your own health will determine the health of your business. Yeah.
Well, you're absolutely a walking example of that. What's the future hold, Brucey?
Yeah, well, again, I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing. I'm 57 now. I think things have changed. I was talking to Tammy the other day, and we're talking about her father and my father when they retired. I think she mentioned her dad retired about 55, 57, and my dad was probably around 60 sort of thing. So, but we're living longer at the moment, and I think the more active you can become. But yeah, I've got a place in Hawaii. I look forward to spending some time over there as well, and eventually, moving over there at some point. Which I'm really looking forward to as well. It's a beautiful place. Talk about exercise, getting out, around the park, Capulani Park, sort of thing. But yeah, the next certainly 2 or 3 years, very much being involved in the business, and really enjoying doing what I'm doing.
We've spoken at length about those businesses, but you can give the listeners the websites. Our producer will, of course, put all these links in the show notes for the listeners.
Yeah, so Performance by Design, www.performancebydesign.com or .co, one of the two, .com I think it is. And probably the other one is Tammy Roos, tammy@tammyroos.com. Some really good stuff on both of those. The Nurture Group websites, Nurture Her, Nurture 360, and hopefully they're starting up again. We had a good meeting the other day. So obviously with the COVID world, trying to navigate, events. So we'll talk about when they start again. But yeah, if you can whack all those up and get them nice and accurate. Probably missed a few dots.
Our producer is Tommy Senior. I tell you what, he's fastidious with this kind of thing. He won't miss a beat. Is it overseas Fiji type stuff?
Yeah, Fiji. Well, it looks like we're trying to bring them on shore, which will be interesting. Yeah, which we'll try and find a really good place. But we're just trying to bed them down. Probably looking at May next year, which will be awesome. And
that's brilliant.
Yeah, our alumni are really looking forward to getting back together and getting some great advice, but getting together, and we're all looking for some connection, aren't we? There's a lack of connection over the last sort of 12 months. So I think everyone's looking forward to navigating what the new world looks like.
I implore the listeners to check out all those websites, because it'll be the best thing you can do today by some margin. Any parting words from Paul Roos?
Oh, I think I talk about a cartoon that I read, and it really resonates me. I've spoken about this a lot. The little kid says to his granddad, Granddad, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And the granddad says, just be a good person. There's plenty of vacancies.
Oh, mate, that is absolutely brilliant. It's been a pleasure sitting across from Paul Roos. He's a champion. He gives us so much time so generously. Mate, I really do thank you. Listeners, listen to part 1 and part 2 over and over again, because you'll pick up nuggets of wisdom the whole time, mate. Paul, thanks so much, mate.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.